Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us here on Mother and Refuge of the End Times. I'm Debbie Bird Smith here with Raphael Vilanco and Michael O'Neill, who is our special guest. Raphael, do you want to introduce Michael and tell us a little bit about him?
Yes, to all our viewers, well, maybe most of you are familiar with Michael O'Neill because of his work on EWTN. He has a wonderful series on EWTN every Saturday called Explore with the Miracle Hunter. It's a documentary series delving into the different miracles of the Catholic Church, but most especially, it concentrates on the various Marian apparitions throughout history. And he also has another series on EWTN called They Might Be Saints, and he also has a radio show on the same network. So, with no further ado, we have Mr. Michael O'Neill.
Hi, Raphael. Hi, Debbie. Good to see you today.
Well, I have to say, I love They Might Be Saints. That's my very favorite because, always looking for saints. So we're thrilled to have you, Michael. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Michael.
Go ahead, Raphael.
Yes, Michael. So recently, the Vatican has been making all these different decisions on the various apparitions throughout the 19th and the 20th century apparitions, known and unknown. So since they had released this new document, the new norms on Marian apparitions. So, what can you tell Michael? What is your opinion about the new norms and about the decisions that we have?
Well, I think what's fascinating. There's been a lot of discussion about the new norms that came out on May 17th, and it's important to put them in context. For example, we saw these norms, the previous version, come out in 1948, or 78, the norms for proceeding and judging alleged private revelations and apparitions, and that basically laid out the whole rule book of how the Catholic Church investigates Marian apparitions, specifically private revelation. So we talk about the content of the messages, the life of the visionary, any of these things, which would establish it in three categories as known constate supernaturalitate, which means it's not yet established; constate supernaturalitate, which is like Lourdes, Fatima, Guadalupe, the very famous ones that have been, the supernatural character has been established by the church. And then you have this third category, the constate non supernaturalitate, that is where it's definitively not supernatural, where they have evidence to say that either it was a fraud or a hoax or something else, but they know that it really wasn't Mary. So that's kind of the basic context. We've been languishing with these norms or existing with these norms for many years. And I give talks around the country, maybe 20 a year, and I often talk about how the Catholic Church investigates the supernatural. And when I do, I say there's these old norms that someday will be updated. Well, that someday was May 17th of this year. And what was very interesting about these norms is that they changed some things. And for me, I thought it was a successful document in some ways. One is it allowed for greater clarification. For example, in the past, when a local bishop would give a judgment about supernaturality or any sort, we had no idea whether they were actually working with the Vatican specifically, or if they were out on their own. And it seems that the Vatican had requested that they never were acknowledged as being a part of these decisions. And so we never really knew if it was a bishop kind of going off on his own, making a decision, like in the case of Lipa in the Philippines. I think we see Bishop Raymond Arguelles. He operated independently of the CDF. And then there are other cases, of course, where they work with the CDF, now the DDF, the Dicastery for the Causes of Saints. And so we never really knew. But now, according to these new norms, the decisions will be coming out of Rome in collaboration with the local bishop. So it's very clear who's been working on the cases. And another positive aspect, in my opinion, is that it's more inclusive. So in the past, these only related to Marian apparitions. And when you had to talk about things like Eucharistic miracles or weeping statues or incorruptible saints or any of the other categories, the stigmata, any of these interesting areas that the church covers and might investigate, there weren't really a formal rule book for those. I always had to kind of retrofit the Marian Apparitions document and say, you know, that this could be applied similarly. But now it includes everything. So when the church will make a statement about Eucharistic miracles, for example, it will be done according to these new norms. So I think that's a very positive improvement. And we also see an improvement in speed. The church often took many, many years, decades or centuries in the old days to make a comment about the reality of a miracle. And we even have a case like in Les Lots in France in 1664, Benedicta Rencourel, who was a shepherdess, I believe in the year 2007 or so, the church gave its official declaration of supernaturality. That was many centuries later. So they take some time. And even in our own United States, in Champion, Wisconsin, we see 1859, those visions claimed by Adele Bryce, the Belgian farm worker there in Champion, Wisconsin. We saw in 2010, Bishop David L. Ricken from the Diocese of Green Bay gave his formal Constate Supernaturalitate. So sometimes it takes a long time, and many of the faithful are looking for information sooner. And so I imagine that some might see this as a positive thing where the judgments will roll out more quickly. So there are some definite positives, and the norms now have 6 categories of judgment. In the past, there were those 3, this sort of green light, red light, yellow light situation, but now there are 6 categories. So perhaps this allows the church to speak with greater precision. And so when it gives a statement, it can, if it's discouraging something or if it's giving a condemnation or sort of a hold on a situation, we can see that the church has some more levels to choose from when it gives a statement. So I could see where some would say that there's a positive development there, but it does seem to take things out of the hands of the local bishop. So that is a challenging thing. It seems that the Vatican now is in charge, and the local bishop will perhaps can recommend that an apparition be examined or an older apparition be reconsidered, so to speak. But it seems like everything is being processed out of Rome. So that takes some of the authority of the local bishop away, which in the principle of subsidiarity or just having somebody closest to the phenomena on the ground, the bishop is the person. And so having theologians in Rome make the decision might not be quite the best thing. So that's the change that we've seen. And perhaps, in my opinion, the biggest change of all is the change in these new norms from May 17th that relate to supernaturality. In the past, we've seen perhaps something like 30 cases throughout Christian history. We have as many as 2,500 Marian apparitions reported throughout history. You can go to my website, miraclehunter.com, to see that whole list. But approximately 30 have been recognized by local bishops as being supernatural throughout the ages. And then the Catholic Church maybe 16 times has given some sort of recognition to those judgments. And so the church is saying definitively that this is a supernatural event. The faithful doesn't have to believe in it, of course. It's private revelation. It's a bonus for our faith. But they did comment definitively on the supernatural character of the event. And so that has changed as of this new document. So the highest level of approval that any alleged Marian apparition can have is now nihil obstat, Latin for nothing obstructs or nothing stands in the way. So they're not making a declaration that Mary really did appear, but they're saying that the faithful, if in their own judgment, they choose to embrace this devotion, incorporate it into their own lives, benefit from it in their own way, they can without any problem, without any danger to their faith. And so of course, when the church is just issuing yellow lights or maybe statements, it's a lot easier to do that. They're basically ruling out all the things that contraindicate that this is a true Marian apparition, and all the things contrary to faith and morals. If these things are flagged, then they give it a negative judgment. But if it doesn't have those problems, or as we'll talk about later in this show, I'm sure, nihil obstat with clarification, which is the way they do it right now, we can see that the faithful can embrace these things very quickly. But as I was alluding to, the big failure of the document is there is no longer a declaration of supernaturality. So we never again will have a situation like Lourdes, Fatima, or Guadalupe, or at least until the document's changed. So we won't have any supernatural apparitions anymore. At least the church won't investigate that or say that. So that's a point of sadness for a lot of people who are miracle-minded Catholics or who want to honor Our Lady and recognize that she actually did appear in a place. That will not happen anymore. And the only potential scenario where it would happen is if the Pope himself decided that something was supernatural and that he made a statement. And in the document, it does not say how that could ever happen. We don't know if the Pope would just wake up one morning and have a good idea and make the announcement, and that would be okay. We don't know if he'd be working in concert with the local bishop. We don't know when the investigation would start, how long it would last, when we could expect to see answers. We just know that he could do it. And so it's very complicated right now. I sadly say that I really believe that we'll never see another approved Marian apparition supernatural-wise unless the document is changed. So that's kind of my long-winded summary of what we're dealing with this new document. So it's a wonderful thing that they've re-examined those norms and republished them and reworked them. But I think that there are some failures there that make things complicated. And just to wrap up, it is my belief that this document, this May 17th document, which preceded 9 judgments prior to Medjugorje, was written specifically to solve the case of Medjugorje. The Vatican didn't know how to handle it, and it came up with a new rule book. We might say that the goalposts were moved in a little bit in order to make a comment about Medjugorje. So I think that's an unfortunate thing that's happened. But most people aren't talking about this, that maybe those norms were written just for Medjugorje, and now we're seeing the results of that. But that's my long-winded synopsis of what we're dealing with the new norms.
Well, it was quite a wonderful synopsis. Yeah, I think of all of the approved apparitions and messages, the status of Medjugorje was the one that seemed to evoke the most interest because those are still going on. And typically in the history has been that there really hasn't been any kind of declaration made about a specific apparition until the apparitions ended. And we all know Medjugorje is sort of like the never-ending apparitions. Been going on since 1981, I believe. And so I think of anyone who follows or studies the miracles and the apparitions of the church. That was one of the biggest questions. So what do you find to be the biggest change will be really pertaining to the apparitions in Medjugorje, or do you see that's going to be? It sort of I think a lot of people took that very much as a stamp of approval or a validation of Medjugorje that is never really received outside of the bishop of the diocese. But as you mentioned, now the bishop really doesn't really matter what he thinks. I shouldn't say it that way. It probably does hold weight, and as you said, they can contact the Vatican and say, I think this is worth looking into. But it's not the same as you said, having that right there contact with the people in the area where that's happening, so that they have a sort of a better feel about the visionaries and many and all miracles that happen that come forth from that. So can you kind of talk about Medjugorje a little bit?
Yeah, I think that for a lot of people, a lot of devotees of Medjugorje have been very excited about this news because for a long time, since 1981, we've seen exactly 0 statements coming out of Rome showing its support for Medjugorje. So, there's been sort of hints that Pope John Paul II may have had great interest or devotion to Our Lady of Medjugorje. We have seen things like a apostolic visitor from Rome that is resident there and taking care of Medjugorje. And we have also seen things like Pope Francis is issuing messages to the youth festival for a number of years now. So we've seen different, an allowance of pilgrimages, for example. So we've seen different signs that the church has been in support of the devotion going on at Medjugorje. And so when we finally have received a statement, a lot of people jumped up and down and were very excited to see this come out. They would say, the highest level of approval coming out of Rome. But I think there's a couple of things to pay attention to. Number one, if you were to compare what Medjugorje was like before the announcement on May 17th and the announcement or the recent statement, and after, the day before and the day after, it's essentially the same. So prior to that statement, pilgrims could go to Medjugorje. People could bring their own personal faith and devotion to the place. And like I said, there were some signs that the church was taking care of Medjugorje from a spiritual or pastoral point of view. You'd see that apostolic visitor, you'd see those messages from the Pope. And so, we saw some sort of olive branch or welcoming of the devotion in some ways. Now, after the devotion, or after this announcement, we have seen the Vatican recognizing it with a nihil obstat. And so, pilgrims can still go there. Perhaps the Pope will still issue a message for those youth festivals. Still, the local bishop or the apostolic administrator will take care of the pilgrims. So nothing has really changed. And so, but people are happy that it has been acknowledged. And so, and the local bishop there in Bosnia-Herzegovina, he is there to work with Rome on this. And in the past, 2 consecutive local bishops have been very negative towards Medjugorje. We see the most negative possible judgments. Constate non supernaturalitate. Is it established as not supernatural? In 1991, the Zadar Declaration out of the Yugoslavian Bishops' Conference gave it that maybe, that yellow light statement of non constat, maybe it's supernatural. But anyway, I think what's really important that a lot of people are missing right now is that, yes, there has been an approval, the highest level that the church can do. However, the church changed the rules just in time to make this statement, removing the possibility that it could ever be supernatural. And then when Cardinal Fernandez in the press conference, he got that difficult question of, well, will Pope Francis investigate this fully later? He came up with the answer of no, not at all. Nihil obstat is sufficient. So we should expect to see no further movement from in this papacy towards approving Medjugorje as supernatural. That a lot of people were hoping for that, but it will not. That will not happen according to what is going on in this moment. And I think that the most important thing for devotees of Medjugorje, they might say, well, it has an approval, and maybe not much has changed, but actually something has changed in the wrong direction for the devotees of Medjugorje, because the church has clamped down on Medjugorje a little bit. Mm-hmm. So in the past, you could go there on pilgrimages. You could stay in the houses of the visionaries. You could talk with them. Their messages were embraced and celebrated. And now the recommendation from Rome is pay no attention to the visionaries. And so that's kind of interesting. And they've also said the messages were released all around the world from the visionaries very easily. And now the messages must be examined by Rome, or at least by that apostolic visitor. And there has to be sort of the approval of the message. And there may be the editing of the message, which we might not even be aware of coming from Mary. I don't think you can edit messages from Mary. I don't really think that's allowed, but somehow that seems to be what's happening. And so we see that the church is actually clamping down on Medjugorje. And in the statement itself, it says things like, we can't say that Mary is really appearing here. And they refer to them as alleged apparitions and alleged visionaries over and over again. So Rome isn't doing a lot to actually affirm the supernatural character here or anything at all, but they are throwing out that olive branch to those 50 million pilgrims who have gone there, all those healings, conversions, vocations that everybody across the spectrum can acknowledge and celebrate the great fruits of Medjugorje. But the church is divorcing those two. And in the original in that previous document from 1978, we see that the life of the visionary was very important. That was part of what the approval process was. If the visionary didn't live a model life or was caught lying or making money or whatever the thing was, the church said this is a reason for a constate non statement. They also said if there were any problems with the messages, constate non, the most negative possible judgment according to the old norms. And now in the new document, they've listed all these clarifications and things saying, well, most of the messages are really okay. We're not going to say they're from Mary, but they're okay. And we're also seeing that they're saying, here are a few problems we have that need to be cleaned up a little bit. So it's not really a nihil obstat, it's an almost nihil obstat in some ways, that almost nothing is a problem. So, for all the celebrating that is going on, we see some kind of, some challenges with it. So it's a complicated situation, I guess.
So in some ways, it really added to the confusion a little bit more. But when we're talking about stepping away from Medjugorje for just a second, when you look at something like a Pieta, where we've had many supernatural events, and with Sister Sasagawa, does that mean that those supernatural events that have long been studied and looked to in a Pieta are not considered supernatural anymore?
No, it doesn't mean that, but you bring up an excellent point. I think that even though they will no longer be issuing statements of supernaturality going forward, I hope that changes. And I feel like there's a path for that to change. For example, if the faithful start latching on to devotions as apparitions and start taking it too far, the Vatican will have to go back to being more clear. But in the interim, for maybe another 40 years before we see a new document, we're going to have to deal with the fact they won't approve anything. But they won't touch any of these cases like at Knock or La Salette or Lourdes or Fatima, Guadalupe. They won't go back and relitigate those or discourage those. Those are cemented. Those are fine. And the real question is, there's a handful of cases like Akita that you mentioned, where you see the local bishop having given his approval of supernaturality, but Rome has never, ever made a statement about that or shown in the classic ways its support. What are those ways of support? The Pope could visit the site. He could send an emissary with a golden rose. They could canonize the visionary. They could set up a feast day. They could build a basilica. There's any number of ways that the church will show recognition to a Marian apparition. You look in our general Roman calendar, you have Lourdes, Fatima, Guadalupe, Our Lady of Mount Carmel as Marian apparitions that are recognized in the calendar. If it's in the calendar, it's not going to get reversed. So those are good. But what about these handful of cases where the bishop has stated something and Rome never has? And we all know that when a bishop states something, sometimes it can be reversed. We look at Our Lady of Amsterdam. We look at Lipa in the Philippines. We look at Itaparanga in Brazil. We see a handful of cases where there's been that positive judgment from the local bishop, and then the Vatican has said, maybe not, and they've reversed it. And so I'm curious about these cases like Champion from 1859, 1973, Akita in Japan, 1980, Cuapa, Nicaragua, 1983, San Nicolas, Argentina. These are 4 cases where the local bishop has pronounced positively, but Rome has never really said anything or done anything for those cases. So I'm very curious to see if those get re-examined and then what would happen. And especially Akita is so interesting because the statue that wept tears and bled is in the form of Our Lady of All Nations. And so that's important because as part of this recent nine apparition examination before Medjugorje, Our Lady of All Nations was one of the ones that was investigated. Well, we don't know how much it was reinvestigated, but it was commented on by Rome, and it said it got the constate non supernaturalitate, the most negative one. They took it from being an approved apparition some years ago. I guess that it was downgraded, but it got that fully negative judgment. And now we have a statue from 1973, weeping tears and bleeding, in the style of a condemned Marian apparition. So does that mean that Akita will also be flipped as a result of the association with that? So I think it's a great question, and it'll be interesting to see what Rome does.
Very much so, because I think that was one of the first, that was one of my first thoughts. Of course, Medjugorje, but Pieta is such an interesting case. And with Sister Sasagawa recently dying, I thought, well, maybe with her passing, it might sort of regenerate some kind of interest or movement in what was happening there. But we certainly haven't seen that, have we?
Well, I think it might be the exact opposite. I think that logic was good up until May 17th, even though she died after May 17th. Or we see that, Our Lady of All Nations having been condemned. And so having a statue from a condemned apparition as being the central figure in an alleged Marian apparition or a bishop-approved one, we might see Rome jumping in and making a statement, especially with the passing of Sister Agnes Sasagawa. Now the timing is wide open for them to do whatever they want. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens.
Michael, with the recent cases which the Vatican had given verdicts, there are 3 cases that are, very interesting. One is Our Lady of the Rock in Santa Domenica Placanica with Fratel Cosimo Fragomeni. We have Our Lady of Mercy of Pellevoisin in France. And also we have Our Lady of Sorrows of La Codocera in Chandavila, Spain. So what do you think, what can you tell us about these 3 lesser known apparitions which the Vatican has approved?
So for each of those, I would recommend people go to my miraclehunter.com website. I have full pages dedicated to those little known apparitions. And I think, again, we're dealing with the approval. You speak correctly when you say they are approved, because it is the highest level now of Vatican approval. I had those on my website as far as a faith expression category previous to the Vatican giving its judgment. So we see that those were, in my mind, those were cases that could be someday declared supernatural. Pellevoisin and also La Codocera, Chandavila, those were cases that I suspected that they would investigate further. And I'm not quite sure how much investigation further is going to happen, unfortunately. So we see all these 3 cases as nihil obstat, which again is, according to the old norms, red light, yellow light, green light. Those are yellow lights, or somewhere in the middle there, where they have not quite given it the green light of approval. But we see these as fully embraced by Rome at this point, and saying nothing is wrong with it. So again, in these statements, the church will often say, this is a beautiful devotion. It's safe for the faithful. There are no problems with them. And that's wonderful that they're doing that. But and even in the case of La Codocera, for whatever reason, they were praising the lives of the visionaries. Now, in the Medjugorje document, they were steering clear of saying anything related to the visionaries. In fact, they were purposefully not commenting on the visionaries. But in La Codocera, in that statement, for example, they made a specific point to talk about the holy lives or the good lives of those people who saw the Virgin there. So it's an interesting case. And again, in all these cases, the church doesn't expect us to say Mary appeared there. So it's kind of complicated that we're to embrace these devotions if we find them useful in our lives of faith, but maybe we're never supposed to really say that Mary appeared there for sure. So
don't take it too far.
it's a little bit complicated right now.
Yes. And also, Michael, I'm thinking of another apparition because this is one of my favorite episodes of your documentary series, Explore with the Miracle Hunter, which is the case of the Virgin of the Revelation in Tre Fontane, Rome, to the late Bruno Cornacchiola and his children on April 12, 1947. Do you think we will see a verdict and a decision soon from the Vatican about the apparition of Tre Fontane, Rome?
Yes, that is an excellent question, Raphael, and thank you for your kind words about the series. And that too was one of my favorite episodes that we did, and getting to visit to that location in Rome was quite fascinating in Tre Fontane. And so, what's interesting about the case of Tre Fontane is we see that the church has never given it a statement of supernaturality. So it always sat in this nihil obstat phase, perhaps, or this public devotion is encouraged. And so we see that as it has never progressed along fully to this place where the bishop has given his statement. So it is possible that case is re-examined. And of course, it's in Rome. So the Bishop of Rome is the Pope. So he's the one who would have to initiate that effort. And so we have seen the support of John Paul II, who's even visited that site. We've seen the support of bishops, and there's been quite an interest in that 1947 case. But maybe, given that it's in Rome, makes it extra complicated that there's no local bishop to advocate for it. It's the Pope himself who would have to take interest in that case and have it re-examined. And to be honest, as I said, on my website, I have a category called faith expression, and that one is in that list as well. So we already have the faith expression at that place approved by Rome. So we won't ever see another case of constat de supernaturalitate established as supernatural. So it already sits as a case with faith expression. So it's already as far as it can go, unfortunately. I'd love to see it further investigated, but given the fact that, again, the Pope would have to initiate it, and that would have to be his prerogative to call it supernatural, I'm not sure what's going to happen there, but I wouldn't expect too much if I had to guess.
Yes, but also, Michael, with the Tre Fontane case, there is also a controversial aspect to it, because like La Salette, there is also Bruno left a diary of controversial, similar to the secrets of La Salette. What can you tell us about those alleged secrets of Tre Fontane?
Yeah, very, very, very good, Raphael. You're on the money here. Exactly like La Salette. So in the case of those 1846 apparitions in La Salette in France, the children received, Melanie and Maximine received a message on one day, secrets, you might say. And those were the ones that were approved by Rome. And it's one of the top 10 most highly investigated and approved apparitions in the world. So and if you've ever been to that place, it's an amazing basilica in the Alps. It's an incredible place to visit. So I think that devotion there is amazing. However, we see the secret having been expanded later by Melanie, one of those visionaries. She either wrote more, or she remembered more, or more was released. But it's quite different than the original secret that was approved by Rome. So it's a point of great controversy. And so we see a similar situation in the case of Tre Fontane. In 1947, Bruno Carnacchiola, he was an Adventist. He had a great hatred for the Catholic Church. He was out playing with his children and at a location there at Tre Fontane, and he saw a vision of Mary, who revealed to him the truth of the dogma of the Assumption. And he converted on the spot. His life changed. His cause for canonization might even be open at this point. I believe it is. So he had a tremendous turnaround. And again, very quickly within that first year, Rome actually showed its support of this devotion, similar to what we might call the nihil obstat in modern times, or in this most recent version of this norm. So we see the church jumping on board and approving it from the point of devotion, starting right away in 1947. And of course, many years have transpired now without Rome ever having made a declaration beyond that nihil obstat, or that public veneration allowed. So what happened is the question. Well, the question is, Bruno, who had this amazing moment, this great conversion, this message on this one date that everybody kind of pointed to and celebrated, he went on to claim other messages related to Mary. And those messages didn't get quite the level of approval that first message was, with some sort of a nihil obstat or public veneration allowed. So it became a complication in that we had an approved living visionary, so to speak, or at least it was allowed starting in 1947 while he was still alive. And then he claimed other visions of Mary, or at least messages via locution. So that's a very complicated case. And I imagine these new norms sit quite well right now, where they're just going to leave it alone and not do anything with it. But you're correct, Raphael, that complication exists in this case of Tre Fontane.
Debbie?
Okay, I was going to just mention once again that a lot of this information is on your website, and it's a great place to explore. You could spend a lot of time there, just rifling through all the information, which is so very, very interesting. We have many established and long-standing apparitions and visions, Lourdes. I was very interested to hear you say, because I never really thought about this, but I didn't realize it at all, that there was no, and maybe I got this wrong, but there is no approved miracle associated with Lourdes. Is that correct?
I wouldn't say that, and you'd have to point me to wherever I had said something similar to that. Lourdes, of any place in the whole world, has more miracles, you might say. And we have for example, the apparitions to Saint Bernadette, and then that does have the approval of the church. And then we have the 70 cases of healings that were approved by local bishops and Rome, related to people bathing in the water, and healings from blindness and deafness and everything under the sun. 70 out of 7,000 cases examined there, remarkable cases, have been officially pronounced on. So, and we have the incorrupt body of Saint Bernadette as well. So it's truly a place of tremendous miracles throughout its history. So I would definitely say that Lourdes has plenty of approved miracles, investigated and approved miracles. So,
well, I'll chalk that up to maybe listening late at night. I don't know, because it really perked my ears up. I was like, wait, no, that can't be right. So I'm glad you clarified that for me personally, because I have a great devotion to Saint Bernadette, and I think so she's one of our greatest saints and our greatest example of suffering.
Agreed.
Heroic suffering. So, Raphael, do you have any more questions or anything?
Michael, with these new norms, do you think, like in the future, like under a new papacy, do you think they could revise a new set of norms again, and maybe like reverse, or the decisions which this present papacy had made on the most recent apparitions that we have judged?
Well, I think that we will see under a new papacy some changes. I would. Well, we'll see. We'll see how these current norms play out. But again, if we see the case that nihil obstats are being issued, I don't want to say willy-nilly, but plenty of nihil obstats being issued, and the faithful really embraces them and takes them to almost an extra level beyond what was intended, the Vatican will need to come up with a new document someday and say, okay, let's go back to discerning whether supernatural events did occur or not. So I do think that's possible in the next papacy. I also think that Medjugorje can be commented on by the next pope. I expect that. And I was a part of that Vatican press conference. I was connected remotely. Everybody else was listening, through YouTube, but they let me in as an EWTN journalist, which was great. And I was excited because they gave me a little box or comment area to be able to fire my questions into Cardinal Fernandez. And he ignored all my questions, unfortunately. But my big question is that, okay, you're saying we're not going to declare it supernatural, but isn't it kind of within the whole Medjugorje framework, isn't it baked into the system that we'll know if it's supernatural or not? A permanent sign is promised. 10 secrets have been said, they'll be revealed. and any other number of miracles, but those big ones, of course. And so if all the visionaries die and there's no big miracle, no sign and no secrets, we know it's not true. And if the, we know these secrets come out and a sign appears, we know it's true. So doesn't Rome have to say something at some point? And so, this could be the case. They ignored my question, but this could be a case of kicking the can down the road a little bit, throwing a hot potato to the next pope, perhaps, to answer that when some of these things may or may not happen. So,
and wouldn't that
but I
same
think
be
built
true?
into Medjugorje is this answer.
Wouldn't that be true for Garabandal as well?
Exactly correct. So Garabandal has that same established predictions for the future. So if they don't happen, we know Garabandal is false. If they do happen, we know that it's true. But in either case, the church has to say something. But perhaps this papacy, they're not interested in that right now. So maybe it's a passing the buck or saving it for the next guy. I'm not quite sure.
Now, Michael, I know this is my question is very close to the heart of like myself and many other Filipinos. Do you think these new norms would play? Do you think Lipa would still have a hope under the new norms? The apparitions of Lipa in the Philippines in 1948.
Thank you. The 1948 apparitions in Lipa in the Philippines, and I've been there myself, and we've talked about it many times, Raphael, you and I. And I would have to say that if you paid attention to the timing, right before the new norms were issued in May 17th, they issued that new statement on Lipa.
Yes.
Saying that document from the Pope was actually found and it existed and here it is and whatever that was. They released it before the new norms came out. So by virtue of the timing where it was given a negative judgment right before the new norms, I would say that it will be close to impossible for them to reapply the new norms in that case, simply because they squeezed it in before the new ones came out. So I can't imagine that they would somehow reapply the norms without the perhaps a future local bishop can ask for it to be reconsidered, but my guess, unfortunately, is that we've seen the end of Rome considering the Lipa apparitions.
Yes, but the document, I've been in contact with a good number of devotees in the Philippines and promoters of the mediatrix devotion, and they're still arguing, even with the document which the CDF had presented, allegedly showing that Pius XII had reaffirmed the non-supernatural character of Lipa. The document is still a very controversial issue because they allegedly, according to several people, that the Vatican had still presented the public with a questionable document because it is not on an official Vatican letterhead and it is filled with erasures. So it's still a very controversial issue still in the Philippines regarding the Lipa apparition. So
I can say it's a great point. It again, it would take a new bishop to re-advocate for this after this papacy. And I say after because we have seen in the Medjugorje statement and other statements and Our Lady of All Nations that this papacy seems to be antagonistic towards the mediatrix term. And you see that Cardinal Fernandez even referred to this again in this recent press conference. So by virtue of the fact that Lipa has in its title Mediatrix of All Graces, you can bet all your money that this papacy will not consider it because it seems to be trying to clarify that specific point. So again, a future papacy might be able to consider it, but this papacy certainly will not.
Right.
Debbie?
Lots to take in here. why do you think that is? Why do you think they're so a little bit obstinate about that? Do they give some explanation, or
From
is
what
this
I can understand, is that even though various popes throughout history, and even Pope Francis on at least one occasion, has referred to Mary as mediatrix, and this is a constant tradition of our church, I believe the issue is that of confusion, is that in an effort to work towards Christian unity, elevating Mary in the way of co-redemptrix and mediatrix causes confusion amongst Christians. And so no amount of clarification, they believe, could override this title given to Mary. So I do believe that's the number one issue, is that they're worried about ecumenism in some way, and how Protestants and others would misunderstand it. So for better or worse, I believe that's just what's going on.
Well, I can certainly, as a convert to Catholicism, I can certainly understand the concern about that, because obviously in most Protestant traditions, there's much confusion and much pushback on anything that involves Mary, and so that would be a big bone of division that would strike even deeper than anything that we have already. So that certainly makes sense. But that's sad. I think it's kind of sad that I'm all for ecumenism, but we have to stand up for our faith. What, in your opinion, and you've studied and know about so many of these apparitions and visions, and really studied this, what to you is the most interesting of all the known apparitions that we tend to look at?
That's a great question, and I'd probably have to meditate on it a little bit. But interesting is a tricky word. It could mean a lot of things. I mean, interesting in so many cases, or in so many ways. The 1947 Tre Fontane case that Raphael brought up is truly amazing, and the Akita case in Japan is truly amazing as far as interesting goes, where we have these remarkable events that have happened. And of course, you can never argue against Fatima. That of course is the gold standard. But for me personally, if we move beyond interesting and we just ask what is my favorite Marian apparition, I would have to say Our Lady of Guadalupe. To me, this has been such an inspiration for me, and my even my mother, who kind of inspired me early on to pursue this career, hunting miracles. But every time I go there, I was just there this past June, and it was amazing to get to see the Tilma up close, and it's just the apparitions, the canonized visionary, that Tilma, with all the miracles and the impact on it's the greatest miracle in the last 500 years, you might say, and even in our hemisphere here, you could say, what bigger miracle is there? So for me, Our Lady of Guadalupe will always be number one. I don't have a drop of Mexican blood in my body, but I'm a Guadalupano. I love Our Lady of Guadalupe.
Well, I don't think you have to have any Mexican blood in you, because there were so many millions of people converted in this particular vision, that it's indisputable that it's had, probably in that respect, the greatest impact of any other, because I do know that it converted. I don't think that you could ever, even at this point, even count the number of conversions and devotion to that particular apparition. And I think it's a lot of people's favorites. So, Raphael?
Yes. Are we almost towards the end of our show, Debbie?
Yeah, we're getting close. I was just wondering if you had any final questions for Michael.
What else? What else can we expect with your future works, especially with regards to your series on EWTN, Explore with the Miracle Hunter, and other episodes of They Might Be Saints. So what can we expect for the future, for the next episodes and seasons of your two amazing series?
Excellent question.
Thank you for that opportunity. So people can follow me on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and my website, miraclehunter.com, to get all the updates on my latest episodes. And coming out, we have some episodes coming of Explore with the Miracle Hunter coming out of South America. So this past year, I traveled all over South America, and we have now I think we filmed our 50th episode while we were there. So absolutely amazing. And also, I have a new program coming out on the stigmata, that'll be out this year. And we also have a mini series on the miracles of the Eucharist. We've looked at the 5 most highly investigated cases in history. We're talking about Lanciano in Italy, Tixla and in Mexico, Buenos Aires in Argentina, Legnica and Sokolka in Poland. So those 5 cases, we went to all those places. We interviewed the witnesses and the priests at those parishes. They gave us access to see these miraculous hosts. And we've interviewed all the world's top experts on Eucharistic miracles. And so we're really presenting the science that is truly remarkable about Eucharistic miracles. And so you'll be able to stay tuned for that. And my final project that I am not the host of, but an executive producer of, is called Hidden Gems, Catholic Shrines Across America. So this is a program that looks at all the shrines of the United States and presents them. We have a great host. Her name is Nell Angievsky from Catholic Church Tours. She presents at each of these shrines, and that's a new series that is rolling out as well. So lots of projects for me on EWTN.
Well, that sounds wonderful. And I just want to thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about these fascinating and amazing steps that the church has taken, and these miraculous apparitions, because I think everyone is always looking to them and certainly curious about them, because it just feeds your faith. It certainly does. It certainly feeds mine. And I love my visionaries and I love my apparitions, because these are just come down from heaven. This is our connection in a very real way with heaven. So we want to thank you. I hope that you'll come back and visit us again. And Raphael, of course, it's always a pleasure to be hanging out with you and
You too, Debbie.
doing our thing here on Mother and Refuge. So we'll say goodbye for now. Thank you all very much for watching, and we will see you next time on Mother and Refuge of the End Times.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. This was
Michael.
great. Great questions. Okay. I know.